Hello, everybody. This is Brian Lysing. I'm with Financial Brokerage, and this is the webinar on a new long-term care payroll tax. Is one coming to your state? Well, we're going to find out today. I want to thank everybody for taking a few minutes out of their morning or afternoon to join us. If you're not familiar with Financial Brokerage, we are a national marketing organization working with independent insurance agents and financial advisors all across the country in the areas of life insurance, long-term care, obviously with the topic of this webinar, but also with annuities, critical illness, Medicare, supplements, and I probably forgot, disability income. I knew I was forgetting something in there. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining us here this morning. My name is Brian Lysing. I've been with the company over 20 years, specializing in life insurance and previously specializing in long-term care. So today, we're going to give everybody an update on what's happening in some of the state legislatures regarding a new tax that some states look poised to implement to pay for a state-sponsored long-term care policy for people. Did this last year, and there have been some changes and some updates since then, so I wanted to get everybody up to speed on what's happening. So the model for this is the state of Washington and a law that they passed a few years ago. And why is it relevant to us? Well, there's a sales opportunity here because Washington gave people a way to opt out of this tax by purchasing a personally owned policy. And it looks like the other states will do the same thing in some format. So there's an opportunity for some sales here for all of you. And all of us here at Financial Brokerage are very well poised and versed in this to be able to help you. So let's go through what states look like they're going to be affected. I already mentioned that Washington passed their version of this law a couple years ago. There are about 12 states that are in some stage of debating or considering or proposing a very similar law to be implemented in those states. Now, from what we're hearing at Financial Brokerage from some of our insurance companies, I think notably Nationwide and John Hancock put together materials on this. They're watching it very closely. But New York seems to be very far advanced down the line of getting something passed, and California appears to be the most imminent of all these states. So if any of you are in the state of California, you want to pay close attention. It will go into greater detail, but it looks like they plan to have everything wrapped up by the end of 2023 and will likely pass something in early 2024. So time is of the essence. But all the other states, you're probably not too far behind, right? All right, so what does the state of Washington do, and why does it matter now? Well, a couple years ago, Washington passed what they call the Washington Cares Fund, and it was the first state-mandated social insurance program for long-term care in the United States. So their legislature passed this through, and how does it work? Well, there's a tax imposed through payroll deduction, and they're actually going to start deducting that in July. But it's 0.58%, or you could think of it as 58 cents on every $100 earned. Now, this pays for a long-term care plan, which is only worth a total of $36,500. This amount built into law could be changed. It's meant to be able to be ratcheted up for inflation, although we all know $36,000 a year for long-term care, that's not even enough to pay for a year of home health care. So I suppose it's something, but we're going to find out that this law that they passed is definitely not perfect. In the state of Washington, people had a one-time offer to opt out. They passed the law, I think it was early in 2021, and clients had to have something in place by November to be able to opt out of this law. And what happened was that most people didn't learn about it until maybe August of that year. Then they started applying like crazy. Every insurance agency was inundated with requests from clients. People who had a life license but maybe rarely sold life insurance were getting asked questions about this. A lot of people who didn't know what long-term care was. And they may or may not have had even the license to sell it. They certainly had never sold a life policy with a long-term care rider. Most of them had never sold traditional long-term care, and they were getting inundated with requests for this from their clients, right? So that happened very quickly, and soon after, the insurance companies were overwhelmed with applications. Underwriting, I think for one company, they were still trying to get policies issued like at least a year later. So in short order, these companies stopped offering coverage in the state of Washington. They pulled out completely. They couldn't handle the business. Not only that, but Washington did not build in any sort of a provision for recertification. So the fear was that people would get the policy, they would place it in force, and after the state of Washington knew they had it, they would drop the coverage, and then commissions get charged back to you, and the insurance company never has an opportunity to make any profit on the policy for all the expenses that they went to, right? So those are some of the problems that we encountered with the state of Washington. And California, you're going to see here is addressing some of those, right? So as each state passes their version of the law, I'm sure more of these concerns will be addressed. But why was Washington doing this in the first place, and why are other states considering implementing some sort of a payroll tax to pay for long-term care? Well, one, the cost of long-term care continues to increase, just like everything else, although LTC tends to, from what I've seen, increase a little faster than general inflation. All of the states, they are responsible for paying the Medicaid payments out to people who qualify, and long-term care continues to be one of their largest Medicaid expenses, right? So we know that. Well, they're also, the states that is, are looking at demographics, right? They're already paying more than they want to in Medicaid claims. Well, baby boomers, you are the reason, I'm sorry, that these laws are getting passed right now, because in 2023, baby boomers will turn ages 59 to 77. Now, that has not a whole lot to do with long-term care right now, but the states are looking at what's going to happen in 20 years from now. All the baby boomers will be between 79 and 97. If you look at people that are receiving long-term care benefits, I bet you almost all of them are in that age range. So they're having problems now. What kind of problem are they going to have in 20 years, right? So they're trying to find a way to address this. And one of the methods that some states are choosing is a state-based long-term care plan. So I mentioned that there were some problems with the Washington law that was put into place. And here are some of the others. The Washington plan requires 10 years of vesting. So you have to pay the tax in for 10 years to receive the full benefit. Well, what if you're planning to retire? All right, this is a payroll tax, not just an income tax. So you retire 2 years from now, you've only paid in for 2 years, you're not going to get the full benefit, right? But yet you still have to pay in the tax. What if you decide to move out of state, right? You were there for work, but your family lives somewhere else. You decide to leave the state of Washington. You've paid in for the state-based LTC program. You leave. Sorry, you get nothing, right? They didn't put that provision in there, accounting for portability. And also, there's no cap on that tax for high earners, right? It was 58 cents per $100, but there's no cap. So if someone's making, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, there's a great chance that they're going to pay in more than what the benefit is worth, or certainly a lot more than what comparable coverage would be on their own. So those are some of the problems we ran into with the state of Washington. Now, Some of the other states are going to be making some improvements on this, but what we don't know is, are they going to give people a time frame to obtain personal coverage themselves to be able to opt out? Maybe they don't make this available, right? So maybe there isn't a sales opportunity. I think there will be. What are the qualifications of these policies that you would need to have to opt out? It's also something we don't know right now. Will a traditional LTC policy be the only thing available? Can you get a life policy with an LTC rider? Might a chronic illness rider qualify? That all has to be worked out. And then, of course, will a law even be passed? We don't know that yet. We think it's likely. And will it be implemented, right? Washington, even though they passed it, they've had a heck of a time implementing everything. And they haven't even started collecting the tax yet. So there were some issues for them to work through. All right, back to what we do know. California, as I mentioned, is the state that is the closest to passing a similar law. And they have a task force that is doing the research. They're working with an actuarial firm to crunch the numbers, and you can find all this online. Just Google search, California task force for LTC. But what we were able to find there was that the task force currently is considering 5 different options, and there's a range of different benefit levels. One of them is very similar to what Washington put in place. I'm sure they just copied and pasted all of the wording because it's $36,000 a year. Again, not enough to really cover the full costs. But they, on the high end, they also have a benefit that is, if I remember right, $144,000 of coverage for 2 years. So we have anywhere from $36,000 to almost 3 times as much as a benefit range, spanning 5 different options. I don't know which one they're going to end up passing, but their actuarial study has a target completion date of January 1st. So they are likely going to iron out all these details over the next roughly 8 or 9 months or so. Then we'll know what we're looking at. Well, so California is also considering allowing people with eligible private insurance to opt out of this tax. So that's good. There's a sales opportunity for us right there, right? So that's the reason we're even having this webinar. A little difference with the Washington law, though, since Washington experienced so many problems with people trying to get coverage at the last minute, because that's when people do things, right? California is going to say that people need to have their coverage in place prior to the program effective date. So prior to the law being passed. That means for us in 2023, you're going to have to get your clients underwritten, get something in place in anticipation of that law passing in early 2024. So time is of the essence for us right now. Coverage looks like it's going to be subject to periodic recertification. So that means the insurance companies probably aren't going to pull out of California because the clients are going to have to maintain this coverage in place to avoid the tax. Now, luckily, it looks like California is going to figure out some way to make this coverage portable. So if somebody leaves the state to move elsewhere, they would still be eligible for some sort of benefits. And I have no idea how they're going to work that out, but that's why they're in that field and we're in our field over here. All right, so getting back to what Washington did and what we think we can do is as far as designing policies that would allow people to opt out. Well, the state of Washington specified the type of exemption policy and rider that was going to work. So they said that a tax-qualified long-term care plan, like what we have available here, some companies at financial brokerage, would work and allow the clients to opt out of the tax. Again, we expect that to be the same in other states that would pass a similar law. You can have a traditional LTC policy. Again, we're assuming at the same benefit level or greater would be enough to allow the person to opt out. The state of Washington also said that long-term care riders on life insurance policies would qualify to have the person opt out. Now, there were some specifics there. It had to be a true LTC rider and not a chronic illness rider. So you've got to be a little bit careful with your quoting so that you're quoting the right thing, right? So I've covered this in some past webinars, but here's a recap if you're not aware of the differences. A chronic illness rider, it's filed under 101G. Most of these riders, well, some of them will include a permanent ability loss in their language. So what does that mean? To qualify for benefits under either one, you have to lose 2 of 6 activities of daily living or have severe cognitive impairment such as Alzheimer's. Some of the early chronic illness riders also said that that condition had to be permanent, meaning you were not going to get better. Most companies have now taken that wording back out so that it would cover a temporary chronic illness, right? So we don't have to worry about that so much from the client's perspective. But these riders typically have lower administrative expenses. They're almost always indemnity benefits, meaning if your benefit is $10,000 a month, they're going to write you a check for $10,000 and you do with it what you want. You pay your own bills, right? And spend it on whatever you want to do. And the chronic illness riders also do not require a health license. I know some people just have a life license and not a life and health, and they don't require any long-term care continuing ed. The true LTC riders, they're filed under a different tax code, 7702T. You do have to maintain your state long-term care continuing ed every couple of years. You have to have that health license along with the life license, right? And then the way these riders are structured, you could structure the policy, or the company could structure the policy so that you have a long-term care benefit that's greater than the death benefit. We don't see that with chronic illness, right? With chronic illness, if your death benefit's $500K, your LTC benefit or your chronic illness benefit is $500K. With the LTC rider, it could be one of the hybrid policies where maybe your death benefit is $200,000, but yet you have a pool of $400,000 total available for LTC. So a little bit richer policy. And so that's what the state of Washington specified would be eligible for people to opt out. We're expecting that to be the same thing in California and all the other states that are passing similar laws. Now, why would you want to consider long-term care on a life insurance policy rather than a standalone long-term care policy? Well, same reasons that are driving a lot of sales towards the life-based products anyway. With the traditional LTC, you're going to be subject to rate increases. And it's usually not a matter of if, it's a matter of how many and how much, right? So with life insurance, you can get a no-lapse guarantee and have your rates locked in for life. There's also the fact that clients, despite statistics, they think they're never going to use long-term care, especially us guys, right? We're going to die. We're not going to need it. Women have a more realistic perspective on that usually, and they realize what is more likely to happen. But we're in denial for the most part, and we think we're wasting our money if we buy a traditional LTC. There's the appeal of a life insurance policy. Fine. If you don't use the LTC provision, your family's going to get that death benefit. Somebody's guaranteed to get a benefit, whether it's you while you're living or your family when you pass away, or some combination. So there's tremendous appeal to a life insurance-based solution. On top of that, hey, we know that we can look at statistics and see that most Americans need more life insurance anyway, right? I mean, half of all Americans don't have any personally owned policies. Half of those don't have enough. So now look, 75% of everybody you see on the street is a life insurance prospect because they don't have enough coverage. If we look at it from a long-term care perspective, we know that at least half of everybody who's over 65 is going to need long-term care at some point in their life for some period of time, right? Most of the people you see on the street need this anyway. Now, that's unfortunately not enough for most people to take action on it, right? We have to do a lot of convincing. Well, what we found in Washington was that if there's a tax that they can avoid by getting a policy, they're going to jump on this and be calling you and want this stuff right away. It's amazing how that works. And I can tell you, when that happened in Washington, I was getting calls from all sorts of people who had never sold anything like this before. When it passes in your state, the same thing is going to happen. People are going to go to the first insurance agent they know, or the one they know the most, or if someone has mentioned it to them previously, if that was you, they're going to call you and you're going to get the sale rather than somebody else down the street or somebody online. So our recommendations are, if you're in one of those states, and especially California, talk to your clients about this right now. They probably don't know that this is happening. You can be the first one to bring it to their attention. And these policies are not that hard to qualify for. A lot of companies don't require exams. If you're not familiar with the underwriting process lately, a lot of insurance companies don't want to pay for a pyramid exam. They don't want to go to that expense. They can find a lot of information on a person electronically, so they're going to try that method first. And a lot of very healthy people without a whole lot of adverse risk in their lifestyle on top of that can pass through without the requirement for a pyramid exam, right? And I would really look at a life policy, since I'm a life insurance marketer here, with an LTC rider for the dual purpose. But my counterpart here, Leonard Berthelsen, would be happy to help with a traditional LTC quote as well. Another appeal of these policies, a lot of them have cash value. So, or if they don't have cash value, they have a return of premium provision, so that a client can get their cash back. Again, this appeals especially to a lot of the guys out there who think they're never going to use it and want to see that they're actually getting something for their money. They have other things in mind for those dollars and not paying for the cost of care, right? So all that can be built into a policy to help the person feel a little bit more comfortable about it. So again, a recap here. Washington already passed a law like this and gave people some opt-out provisions. Looks like California is going to be next in early 2024. And there's about a dozen states in total that are considering similar legislation. And in all parts of the country, they're really just all over the place. You can see there on the map. So I'm going to leave the map up there for now. But yeah, that's the conclusion of today's webinar. Feel free to call us if you have further questions. I know we've got a 4 or 5 page PDF that outlines a little bit more detail what California is considering. We'd certainly be happy to send that to you. We can help you craft illustrations that we think will meet the requirements. So feel free to give us a call or email us. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions right now.